Marcus, very, very glad you're joining me today.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me down. I feel very privileged. Ready for some big chat.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to talk about your podcast first of all. How to Kill an Hour. So you get all kinds of tech on there.
Yeah.
You review it, you unbox it. Tell me, how did the idea for the podcast come about?
So what I wanted to do is, with How to Kill an Hour, I wanted to pick something that I was passionate about, that I liked. And I wanted to make sure that it was also in an area in the podcasting medium that wasn't actually being covered at the moment. So I like tech and gadgets. We know there's a massive audience of people who love tech and gadgets, but they may be a little bit too intimidated. So how do we make this something that's kind of accessible to all? And we were like, right, we're going to talk about tech and gadgets in the way that you kind of would expect gadgets and tech to be spoken about. So
relatable.
Very relatable. And also the audience appreciates that, we can, quench our ignorance together.
I want to talk a bit about how you help other businesses to set up their own podcasts.
Yeah.
So just briefly tell me about sort of your business and how you do that.
It came to a point where a lot of people coming into the studio and going, this is really not, I'd love to do one of these. Yeah. I'd explain a bit, about how to make a podcast, and they go, oh God, it's a bit hard that. I'm like, yeah, it is, but we love doing that. There's a need for a service here. Let's fill that gap, and let's take a brand that wants to create something, and let's take them from, the original conception of the idea to delivery. So that's what we do. We help people spread their messages. We help give their brands voices. That's what we do.
And I'm assuming that you can help them as well with performance and delivery. You having done a lot of on camera and podcasting, of course.
I think you just put it perfectly. A lot of people need a bit of coaching, and we can offer that. And we've got methods, we've got techniques, just certain mindsets that we can help impress on people to help them kind of get the best out of themselves for podcasts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Not everyone can be as smooth as you straight out the can, George. You know what I mean?
I want to talk a bit about business podcasts, because that's quite a big thing now. Can a brand have a podcast? Is that possible? How would that even work?
Most definitely. If a brand is aware of its audience, it can create content to connect with them. Sometimes the content may not even necessarily have to be about your brand specifically. So for example, let's use Red Bull. Yeah. Is it a sports drink? In my opinion, I'd say it's an energy drink, but is it specifically a sports drink? No, but by creating content that is in the sports arena, by having the Red Bull X races and all that sort of stuff, they've now become a sports brand. So for example, if you as a brand wanted to be associated with the area of sports, like boxing, for example, you might have a boxing podcast and do the same thing. So
that'd be interesting. Say you're a marketer at a brand and you're exploring different types of content and how you can, reach your customers on a maybe more meaningful level than just straight up advertising. And the thing about doing a podcast, what would be your advice? Like, what should they think about?
I think the audience is always core. You either use data for that, or you go and collect data for that. So you go and find who your potential listeners are, or a few of them a sample, and you get information about what they require. So, I don't know, let's pluck a clothing brand or something like ASOS, right? They might have a bit of information about when their customers, or quite a lot of information about when their customers use their site or their app, what they like to buy, what they like to look at. And using that data, they could create a podcast that would engage their audience. It might even be something as simple as they know their audience has free time at this specific time of day for 20 minutes. They could create a 20-minute podcast that has content in it that engages their audience. Now, once you have a podcast that engages an audience, you're going to find brand trust. You're going to find more engagement when it comes to you putting things out there. And eventually, when it comes to having conversations about sales for your product, you're going to have more ears.
And what about getting those listeners? Because obviously that's one of the biggest things, isn't it? You want to actually have subscribers. You don't want to have this podcast up there that's got 3 people and no one's listening to it.
Of course.
What is the secret to that?
So there's big numbers and there's also quality listeners. So with podcasts, word of mouth is great. So ask your listeners to recommend at least one person, if they really like it. Having big names, as with any other media outlet, helps you get numbers in as well. In terms of retention though, once they're there, they're going to have to enjoy what they listen to hit subscribe. So there are some people that, may have an amazing guest, but if their content isn't amazing after that, you may get a drop off, you know. Well, so with numbers, it's a really interesting conversation. It's something to think about as well. Do you want quality or quantity, or do you want a lot of quality? Or do you need it? Do you know what I mean? So
obviously, you can do all these things. You can tricks and techniques to get lots of subscribers, but it's got to start with good content in the first place. It's got to start with good
content. 100%. It's your audience. It's you know, it's what they value. So that's a good way to get numbers, and also just communication. That's one general thing that I see across a lot of really good podcasts. Is they're not afraid to say, "Hey, man, how's it going? Thanks for listening."
Kind of like a fireside chat, isn't it? You're really sort of communicating on a quite personal level with people. Like you say, you've got one listener there. They're engaging with you, you know, on a quite a sort of deep level, really.
Remember, like, a podcast is whispered into, you're whispering into someone's ear.
Yeah. I can imagine you shouldn't get too focused on the numbers. It's a bit like video content. We say the same thing. It's, you know, you could pay an awful lot of money to advertise your piece of content on YouTube or wherever, and you get lots and lots of views. But if you haven't got any comments or shares or engagement, that really, it's not the type of content you want. You know, you want to start with getting people engaged with it. And I think it's probably the same with podcasts.
100%. All about engagement. Once you have a podcast that engages an audience, you're going to find brand trust. You're going to find more engagement when it comes to you putting things out there. And eventually, when it comes to having conversations about sales for your product, you're going to have more ears.
Marcus, thanks for coming down. It's been really good.
Cheers.
Lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
I'll be subscribing.